Wildeman here from the Chicago Connectory. Hopefully you can see my shirt. Hanging today with Jay Margalus from DePaul University. So I'll do a short introduction. So for those that don't know, the Chicago Connectory is an ecosystem that's situated in downtown Chicago, Merchandise Mart, and that is been open now for about 4 years. So we opened in May of 2017. Just had our 4-year anniversary. And of course, during the pandemic, we pivoted a bit as far as how the ecosystem was being run. But with a lot of virtual events and things going on, it's worked out really well. Our hope is we can get back to the Connectory soon and continue our collaboration. So a little bit about the Connectory. I'm Bob Wildeman. I work for Robert Bosch. I've been at Bosch now for about 10 years, and I handle the university collaborations for our IT group, definitely in Bosch, but I also handle the university engagements for the Connectory as well. So that's why you get to listen to me today and listen to Jay Margalus. But Jay, you want to say a few words about yourself, please?
Sure, great, Bob. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I didn't know you'd started one, but I'm glad to be here. My name is Jay Margalus. I'm a faculty member at DePaul University. I teach in our industrial design program. And I run our makerspaces on both of our campuses. And in both of those capacities, I've had the pleasure of working with Bob and Bosch. Really, mostly, Bob is my main connection to Bosch and is the reason that I'm here talking today. So thanks again for having me, and I'm excited to talk about all the cool stuff that we've been doing together and all the fun things we've been doing at DePaul too.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, thank you. So we did a couple pre-meetings to get ready for today, and Jay and I laugh a lot, and so hopefully that will come through as well. I don't know how you'd rather spend your Thursday than listen to an old guy and a professor talk. I mean, what's better than that, right? That's a pretty good day, if you don't mind me saying. So, but one of the things, and we'll do I'm going to kind of move the conversation chronologically a little bit, but not way back, but let's talk about last year, Jay, when we started. Well, I guess pandemic really came serious. I always attribute the pandemic, at least in Chicago, starting on March 17th, right around that St. Patrick's Day. Because I think that was a Tuesday. I think the Sunday before, Mayor Lightfoot had said, hey, we're going to start shutting things down. Things are going to tighten up. Well, of course, like everybody else, we didn't realize what that impact was going to be right away early on. And so as the week or two went by, we started figuring out, at least from the Connectory, how could we respond? How could we help? Of course, everyone's remote then. People were figuring out Zoom and Teams and everything else. But then, Jay, you and I reached out, and we started talking about what could the response be between maybe DePaul and the Connectory. And then this thing known as, and Jay talks about it like it's very easy, it rolls off his tongue, is this thing called PPE. I don't think anybody out there, unless you're in the medical field, knew what PPE was prior to March of 2020. So we got together, Jay, and we started talking about personal protection equipment and what would that look like. So Jay, talk about maybe some of how did that originate? What was kind of the DePaul response, and walk through us for the PPE project.
Yeah, so PPE is personal protective equipment, and especially at the outset of the pandemic, there was a huge shortage of it. We had everybody from doctors and nurses to other frontline workers who were desperately short on protective equipment, to the point where they were reusing equipment that they typically throw away. They were bringing in homemade equipment, masks, face shields, and so forth. And we had seen, or I had seen through various websites, that there were small pockets of movements happening where people were making protective equipment using the equipment that they had at home, 3D printers, rapid prototyping machines, like laser cutters and the like. And so, there were small pockets of makers doing these things right around that March 17th timeframe when, the St. Patrick's Day in Chicago, which is a huge deal, closed down, and we weren't able to do all of that. Right. And so, I messaged a group of people who we work with at DePaul, who are on our professional advisory board for the makerspaces that I run. And I said, hey, this is something that I think we can do something about. And we formed this group called Illinois PPE. And DePaul's a Catholic institution. And what that means is that as an institution, it's geared towards helping society. and helping other people. And that's something that I really believe in as a mission is that service to community. And so we were the first academic institution to step up and say, regardless of what the implications are, we did our due diligence, but regardless of what the implications were, we can do more good than harm by pitching in. Where a lot of other academic institutions, didn't make that decision. So I'm
Right.
proud to be at DePaul because of that.
Right.
So we stepped in, and we ultimately led a group that contributed and continues to contribute face shields and other protective equipment to Illinois and the Midwest area for as long as it's needed, which less in need now, gratefully and thankfully, but still in need some. So
let's spend a moment there. So in those days, well, and so again, the Connectory response was like, hey, we've got these 3D printers, and let's get those at least out in the community to get those working. And Jay and I, we would talk 2-3 times a day, and we go through that. And Jay's like, okay, I've got a student who's volunteered to come pick this up. We're going to start working through there. But this Illinois PPE, I think your website is still up, right? But it's impressive. If the audience has a moment, it's a pretty go ahead and Google it, go find it. It's from the funding to the distribution to everything else. And I know one of the issues that Jay was running into, that Chicago was running into, it's like, great, I don't want to take care of my uncle who's a fireman because the nurse over at whatever Northwestern could really use this face shield. So how do you prioritize it, and how do you figure that out? And so we were very fortunate to work with DePaul and the Illinois PPE because you guys figured it out. And we, as the Connectory and in some respects Bosch, we didn't want to kind of wear that. We didn't want someone coming to point to us and said, hey, why'd you give it to your uncle instead of the nurses over at Northwestern? So Jay, talk about the distribution a little bit. How did you guys determine who did what? And at one point I thought you brought medical students were coming in to say, hey, we want to support too. So talk about the distribution a little bit.
Yeah, we're actually part of a case study now, and the case study has this interesting 4-quadrant. Every case study needs a 4-quadrant something, right? And this case study has a 4 quadrants of organizations that were highly centralized and organized, and organizations that were decentralized and did a lot of work. And we were the most decentralized group, which was actually, it lent itself well to a time, and even times now, where centralized systems like distribution and manufacturing have been disrupted. And so, we worked with a group of medical students who had connections within the hospitals, but were not allowed in the hospitals at the time. They weren't teaching medical students anymore because they were so overrun. So that they had all these students who had a lot of time, had a lot of great connections, and a desire to help. And we utilized them to do a lot of our distribution for us. We set up a node system across the state that where we had people in a distributed fashion fabricating things from their homes, then kind of bringing them to a somewhat more centralized location. We kind of talk about it like a mesh network system where you have central nodes, and then distributing those things outwards. So so that allowed us to work with organizations like the Connectory. That allowed us to and every people from the Connectory, and a lot of people that you knew as well, acquaintances of yours, to connect and get those things distributed out. It allowed us to work with libraries, people from the Chicago Public Library were involved, people from Museum of Science and Industry were involved. We had groups from the Chicago Peace Fellows, people from across the city and the state, makerspaces were involved in the effort, and as a result, I think we were able to keep some people healthy, which is something I'm proud of.
It was huge. I mean, the impact, you never kind of understand where everything goes downstream because you're getting it to the main person, but the downstream stuff. We had it. We're not going to show any slides today, but there was a great tweet that went out from President Obama that it wasn't actually, I don't think it was actually attributed to the DePaul work or the Connector work, but it was our face shields. Our face shields was in that photo that President Obama either tweeted or retweeted. And so I think, Jay, you had captured a screenshot there, and we were using that. And it's just so cool. It's just nice to be acknowledged. It's nice to know that it's the impact that was made not only for the healthcare workers, but I don't know, I don't want to get too serious here, but maybe it saved a life or two. That's pretty important. So that was, and to me, I was proud of that. I was proud that the Connectory could respond. I was proud that DePaul could respond. And again, the other thing is, audience, you may know this. Jay and I could talk for an hour and a half. We're not going to take that much time today.
Yeah.
My kids always tease me when I'm in a room. There's not a lot of oxygen left because I talk. So, anyways, but all right. So let's move on. Let's move on to the next topic. Well, kind of again regarding the pandemic. Last summer, so there was a startup out of the Chicago Connectory called Proxfinity. And what they were doing, what they had made, they were making badges that would be basically used for big trade shows. So if you have a show of 50, 100, 150 people coming through, you wear the badge. The badges light up when you have a common interest, so it's kind of a conversation starter. Well, of course, obviously, all conventions and things like that stopped last summer. Well, the startup did a nice job. Within a week or two, they had pivoted, and they said, hey, maybe we could use this for social distancing. Meaning if there's essential workers, not necessarily in the medical field, but other essential workers out there that know if you're getting within 6 feet of each other, maybe the badge would light up. So Jay, talk a little bit about that, because the startup needed some help immediately. They were having some issues with the charging of these badges, because of course, if you're in a construction zone or you're in a mining area, which are two of the use cases, that badge only had a 6-8 hour life. But talk about a little bit how, because I came to you, Jay, and I said, hey, we've got this issue. How could we quickly prototype and put together something to help them with the charging of the badges? But go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, Bob, you made that connection and you helped usher that project. Even after it kicked off, we were checking in a couple times a week, probably just to kind of see its progress. So, that's a relationship that I'm very glad that we have too, because my students get to work on real life projects then, so this particular project, we only had one student employee of mine working on. I like to think of my student employees, I like to think of it just as another educational opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to teach them in a more informal setting. I've probably had 30, 40 of them go through our maker spaces in the last 4 years that they've been open. And this particular student, Jake Juraka, is excellent 3D modeler. He's actually working at, I can't remember the name of the company right now, but he's working at a 3D fabrication company right now. And the need for the company was to design and fabricate these charging stations. And I'm getting a little feedback, sorry. So I'm gonna so the charging stations were a foot by 8 inches or something like that. He designed them all in a day, the first design, and then 3D printed a model, which is what 3D printers are great for, is that rapid prototyping element.
Right.
And took a picture and sent it off to the company. After a couple more iterations, they were ready to go. And then we did a thing that you're probably really you're supposed to do with an injection mold, which is what we teach in our industrial design program. I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, but he 3D printed 50 some odd cases, which is not what 3D printers are for. It's not made. They're not made for PPE, and they're not made for making 50 charging stations. They're for rapid prototyping and iterating. But anyways, we went ahead and did that, and we were able to deliver for that company, and then they were able to ship those things off to California.
Yeah, they had. So it was. I think again, it was a mining. They had gotten contacted by a mining company, and when and that may have been a second use case, because I thought the mining company, they had a second use case in California. I thought the mining company might have been in Canada. But if you think about that, mining operations, for instance, didn't necessarily stop. Well, if you're going into a mine area, and how do you keep people distance and everything else? But it was funny. I think he went through a couple, 2-3 prototypes originally, and the startup, the owners were like, hey, I like number 2, but not number 1, or I like number 4, not number 3. And to Jay's point, the 3D printing, it's perfect for that. It's so perfect for that. And we were laughing at one point, because I don't know. So I think at some point they had the ability now to charge 500 badges. Well, the little connector, like you see on your iPhone, I think it failed on one of the 500. And they called me and they said, hey, Bob, this thing failed. I'm like, it's a prototype, right? It's not production ready stuff. So,
Right.
and they were, I mean, they were nice about it. They weren't upset at all. But that's the thing. So you build that out, and to Jay's point, if you want to build a gazillion of these, yeah, you need to get this into an injection mold. But that's the fact that the 3D printer could actually be used in that instance is pretty fantastic. Well, Jay, we should back up a little bit, because let's go back and talk about the industrial design group or department. I always call, so Jay says I'm working in embedded systems. Well, it's the same. So, and again, I tease him a little bit. I said, do you mean IoT? Because in Bosch, IoT is a big thing, and now we're moved on to what's called AIoT. So IoT, of course, Internet of Things. AIoT, artificial intelligence of things, I guess. But Jay and I talked about that time. I said, you mean embedded systems? You go, yeah, you mean, and so I think from an academic perspective, though, Jay, that's a pretty good distinction, right? Because when I think of IoT, I think of an iPhone or something like that is connected. But talk about embedded systems a little bit. Obviously, there's much more to it than just connecting things to the internet. It's all the networking, everything else. But go ahead.
Oh, you don't want me to get into this too? Like I could do a class on this, and all 5 people who are listening right now can fall asleep.
And so, I didn't do the reading. So if you could just,
like the nickel tour would be that an embedded system doesn't necessarily have to have an antenna on it. An embedded system is just a chip, a microcontroller, or something else that's embedded elsewhere and is using sensors and actuators to interface with the world. An embedded system can be a pacemaker, and God knows we don't want our pacemakers to have a Wi-Fi antenna on them, because then you've got all sorts of other problems that you don't want to deal with. But a lot of our industrial design program at DePaul does take a unique approach, which is that we believe that objects that designers and industrial designers make will have computers in them, more or less all objects. And you already see that objects are the internet is, for better or worse, embedded in a lot of different things. And what we teach our students is how to think of those systems in a complex systems approach. So not just the human-centered design approach, but a complex systems approach. And we think about the objects and how we're connecting them together. And because DePaul is a liberal arts institution, one of the other things that we bring to the table is not only how all these things are connected together and how we can technically approach that, but how we can do that responsibly, right? How we can do that in a way that is done with a respect to people, to the environment, to everything else around us. Because it's great to have a student from MIT or Georgia Tech or some other place put a system together for you that is connected, with a bunch of other systems on the internet. But to have somebody who actually asks the questions of, like, is this valuable? Is this something that we need to do? And how will this affect humanity? Is something that I think, I really do believe, a liberal arts institution brings to the table. And to go back to that same Illinois PPE thing, it's a question of, like, how do we help society as well? And so that's what our industrial design program is really doing. And I think that's another one of the exciting reasons to be working with the Connectory is that, the Connectory and Bosch, I have felt, and as we've been working together over the years, thinks about those same kind of things. What how do you see that playing in with your mission at the Connectory?
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's the Connectory, again, I know the word ecosystem is kind of overused these days, but it is indeed an ecosystem. And so whether it's a university coming in, another corporate, or a startup, to kind of spend time there, be with us in this space, is traditionally the 3 legs of the stool, which is great. And it's funny because Jay and I would argue a little bit, because Jay wanted to bring a 4th leg in with a government something, I don't know, a conversation for another day. But to that end, we are public facing, and so we will do events. We'll try to bring in some learners that may not always get those opportunities. So whether it's trying to work with, again, local universities to bring in some folks, we work with other startups that try to bring in some of the younger folks that maybe teenagers don't have access to that technology, just to understand it and learn a bit more from it. So we're always opening our doors to allow that to happen as well. And I tell you what, the members and the people at the Connectory, they embrace it. They embrace it. It was, again, pre-pandemic times. We were getting a little bit of complaints from the members, like, you know what, you guys are doing events here all the time, and this is a workplace. I'm like, yeah, but it's the students. I got a university in it, this, and this, and so, but again, the outreach becomes very important to part of our, not only conceptually what the Connectory is all about, but that is also a Robert Bosch value. So Bosch is founded on that as well. So,
Yeah.
but all right, so you keep, and let's talk about the space for a second, because you said in your opening that you're aware, or you run some maker spaces. We haven't talked about IRL, so talk about IRL for a little bit to the audience, because I think this is fascinating. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm going to back up and probably just mention what a makerspace is too, because I don't think everybody is hip to that either.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, good call.
Makerspaces. One of the interesting connections here is that by all accounts, makerspaces started 15 or 20 odd years ago in Germany, and then about 14, 15 years ago, I started my own with a couple friends. Started my own nonprofit makerspace that's out in the Chicago suburbs to this day in Glen Ellen, called Workshop 88. And then after that, I started another nonprofit one called Space Lab. Like I'm the Johnny Appleseed of makerspaces, I think. But the IRL and then IRL2. So we have two makerspaces. IRL2 is cleverly named. It's because it's the second one. There are two makerspaces on DePaul's campus. We have one in the Loop. It's about 5,000 square feet. It's on the third floor of a high-rise building, which you can imagine is a pain in the butt when you're trying to bring 8x4 sheets of plywood up and work on things, And then the second one is on our Lincoln Park campus, and they're student-driven spaces that are, to the point that you were talking about, having events and things like that. There are student-driven spaces that are communities of practice, which is a phrase I recently learned from my wife, who's a real educator, which means, basically they're communities of people who come together to share knowledge and learn things in informal settings. So we've got these spaces that are student run, and the purpose of making them student run is that the way that they're run is the same ethos of the education we're teaching with the hands-on learning there, which is to say that, like, we have a lot of complex systems around us, whether they're systems of Internet of Things like we were talking about, or whether they're systems of governance. And not a lot of people understand how these complex systems work anymore. And so by giving students the opportunity to run these spaces, you're opening up, you're demystifying these systems of governance a little. And at the same time, they're learning how to use all of these complex machines, the 3D printers, the laser cutters, traditional crafts as well. And they're becoming agents of the environment around them. They're becoming people who, instead of using things and having those things own them, right? Because if you don't understand how a thing works, it owns you. They can take that thing apart and they can own it. They know how their phone works. A lot of people look at those things as black boxes. They know how systems of governance work a little bit better. They understand how decisions are made. And to me, that's the most important part. You can put all sorts of machines in a space and call it a makerspace, which is what people do. We've got 3D printers and we've got all this fancy new technology, and you can call that a makerspace. But the phrase I've heard from Marty Culpepper, I think, from MIT, is then you've got a machine mausoleum on your hand. Because if you don't have a place where the community wants to be there and feels like they're active contributors to that community, then it doesn't matter at all. So that's what our spaces are about at DePaul. It's forwarding that informal learning and demystifying systems, and it's really cool to see some of that stuff happening, at the Connectory as well. And we've got another project coming up where I'm going to be sending students, from a connection that you made to the Connectory, and we're going to be doing that all over again.
Well, all right. So go back to we in Bosch we use acronyms all the time. So you threw an acronym out there for the audience. What does IRL stand for?
So it's like a double entendre, right? It's the IRL because it's in real life, but it's the idea realization lab.
Okay.
So you take a concept, and our mission is if we have a student, faculty, or staff member who comes in the space, they can take that idea and bring it into reality as quickly as possible. And as we both know, what happens at these spaces is you've got an idea in your head, but then the real world tells you that that's just an idea. It's not.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't do that. Right.
Wood only wants to be cut along the grain, not across the grain. Right. You have an idea, and then you work with the material to express that idea and to bring it into real life.
Right.
rather than imposing your idea on the material to force it into the world.
Right. Well, Jay, through his work and all the things he's done, I will say this is a very humble guy. So I'm gonna pump him up here a little bit. But so part of my job also at Bosch is I'm a recruiter. So I'm always looking for talent. I'm looking for talent, usually at the university level. And Jay talks about those students that were running the spaces, and we have interviewed and hired two, three, four. I know we've interviewed at least half a dozen in the time that I've been doing this last 3.5 years. I think two or three came into work at Bosch. The numbers aren't important, but the idea is when we started working with these students as candidates to come work at Bosch, oh my gosh, the skill sets they had were phenomenal. I mean, and it's you and I don't know where Jay finds these students, or maybe they just over the years they come together. We couldn't, they were confident in the interviews. They presented well. They explained their ideas so perfectly, and it was just a treat to have them. So again, personally, to help my world, I go recruit where I think is indeed the best fit for what Bosch is looking for at the time. And we love the students. We love the student managers from the IRL. They're just fantastic. They're fantastic. So,
yeah, I'm not going to be. It's all me. I'm just going to say right now, it's all me. No, I
did that. So, no, it's really great. Well, the one thing I will say, Jay, you do a very good job, and DePaul is a large organization, just like Bosch or the Connectory. You do a very good job of finding resources, and whether that's space, whether that's budget, whether that's whatever the case may be, you do a very good job. You're very creative in finding that. Because when we got together, so we were involved with IRL 2. IRL 1 was, I think IRL 1's been around for what, 8 years, 10 years?
4 years.
Just 4 years. Okay, and then IRL 2 is only 2 years old. So,
yeah.
Right? So So we were we were able to get together with Jay and work with him on getting some equipment, some 3D printers, laser cutters into IRL2 in Lincoln Park. And then it was fun just to come and see the grand opening and everything going on there. But if you go in there, I like your point, Jay, because you say you have this idea in your head. But when I would be in the IRL, I just see students, they were in there just doing homework. They may not be making or whatever. They just said, this is a cool space for me to study, hang out, collaborate, drink coffee, whatever the case may be. And the one thing I think, and again, you got to tell me if I have my facts right, I believe the IRL is the only one of two spaces for all students at DePaul to have access to. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people on here maybe know how universities work, maybe not. They're very siloed, the institutions. And this is not a DePaul thing. This is a university thing. If you've got an engineering department, you don't have the art kids going over to the engineering shop and using the shop to make their own what have yous. And at DePaul, one of the decisions we made right out of the gate with the maker spaces was that every student would have, and faculty and staff member would have access to these spaces. And it's because it's the same thing about that community of practice. You don't have a community of practice where you only have one kind of person coming in and working on things. You have a community of practice when you have people from multiple backgrounds, whether we're talking about backgrounds of education or economic status or whatever else. You give everybody access to this space, and you get better ideas as a result of it.
That's fantastic. I love the fact that there's no, because I sent 3 kids through school. And every time, we visit campus, they slide their card or hold their ID to open this beautiful space that only you had to be in that major to have access to. And the IRL is like, nope, come one, come all. And I think also the student managers or the students are there, they'll train the users. They're like, hey, I need help with this table saw. I need help with this 3D printer. There's some dangerous equipment in there. So safety first, right? So the managers do a wonderful job of like, you can come in the space, but you got to go through the orientation to make sure you know how to use the various tools. Yes?
Yeah, what was great about that is, the first year we started the spaces, I trained all the students on how to use everything in them. And then, over the years, that has been a great investment because those students trained the next generation of students and the next generation. And I've had to fill, you have to fill in gaps.
Sure.
Here and there. It's not all perfect. It's not all, it doesn't work 100%. But having your peers teach you how to do something. If you're a student and you walk into the space, having your peers teach you how to do something, I think, is much more powerful, because you see somebody who looks like you doing the thing that you want to do.
Right.
And they're doing it, you know, you like that,
Right.
there's action happening. And, you know, you're talking about people who want to come in there and they're just using their computers to do homework or something like that. They're there because they want to be adjacent to that. You know, they may not be ready to jump on a 3D printer, or maybe they've learned how to use it and they just don't feel like using it today. But they see other people like them using that stuff, and they want to be a part of that. And so it's a true community, which is what these kinds of spaces are all about.
Well, you're exactly right. So to go back to the Connectory for a moment, when we did open, and again, we'll get back there once you know, the in-person activities pick up again. But I would constantly get people from Bosch to say, "Hey, Bob, can I come to the Connectory? I'd like to hold a meeting there. I'd like to, you know, come together, do a workshop." And I would say, "Yeah, we'll, you know, come one, come all. We'll figure it out. What would you like to do?" And at the end of the day, and I would ask them when they're down there, I said, "Why are you down here? We've got offices in Mount Prospect, we've got offices in Oak Brook, we've got offices in Hoffman Estates. Why do you want to come to Chicago?" They said, "Because it's so inspirational. It's so cool. It's such a cool space." And if you guys know Bosch, you know, we're a German company. We had cubicle farms at one point. We're trying to get a little more hip and a little cooler, but they want to come to the Connectory for that exact same thing. I want to be around inspiration. I want to be around some ideas. And not that every time you walk into the Connectory do you have this light bulb go off, but I'll say honestly, I prefer the Connectory over a conference room in Mount Prospect, and that's just me. And so not everybody feels that way. So the inspiration piece, just the environment, I think is such a big part of that. All right, so tell you what, let's talk about a little bit, and we're not going to keep you audience much longer, but maybe last topic we talk about is the Open Skills Network, so OSN. Jay invited me to a group to come together, and I was representing the corporate world, more with my recruiting hat on. What are the type of skills that we were looking for in something? And that is about what I knew about it when Jay invited me. So start from the beginning, Jay. Talk us about Open Skills Network, or OSN.
Yeah, Open Skills Network is an initiative that we got accepted into the pilot program probably in March, and the pilot program included 15 other higher educational institutions. And the pilot program was basically, let's look at courses that you're currently teaching at the university level, and how those courses might line up with skills that could articulate to industry. So you're teaching a class, like the courses that we used are in rapid prototyping and Internet of Things. And the question was, what skills are we learning in these courses that we can explicitly tell students articulate to certain kinds of positions at a company like Bosch? I'm a big fan of Bosch, big because of Bob, really, and big fan of you know, what they do there. And so roped Bob into this, you know, scheme that we've got going on. And you know, we're currently in the final phases of figuring out like how we can bring students through our courses and a new certificate program that we have at DePaul, how we can bring those students into a pipeline that could feed into some place like Bosch and the Connectory. Bob, I'm wondering what your what have been your impressions?
Well, it was interesting. So Jay was again very kind to invite me in, and I think he had a discussion with other employers. Just because Bosch is looking for this certain skill set doesn't mean the rest of the world is. So he had reached out to some other employers. But when we were walking through, and the reason this is close to mine is because I was going through your spreadsheet yesterday once again. I think we're getting ready to submit the final, but the skills that Jay was talking about, yes, some are very technical. Networking, how to embed systems, how to, you know, to connect Raspberry Pi, blah blah blah, the whole things, which were really the top 3 or 4 lists, and then there were some sub skills in there as well. But the final 3 skills, and whether that was associated with DePaul's mission or whether that's just something you're looking for, I just love the fact that we're talking about some of the socialization things that are going on in there, right? There is I think we added in, or got added in, diversity, equity, inclusion. What does that mean? But how, as a student or how, as a person taking this course, how do you build that into the curriculum? It's one thing to say, you know, reading, writing, or arithmetic, blah, 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 fill this out. But it's another thing to have these, how do you know, soft skills, social awareness, some things in there. But as I was reading through that, it's like, darn, this is impressive. This is pretty. Now, granted, it's one thing to have it on paper. It's another thing to execute it in person, right? So the best laid plans, right? But the idea that it is actually sitting there, and whoever may take those skills to say, well, now I want to apply this as an instructor to the class, or the student said, listen, this is part of your requirement. How can you show those skills coming in there? But talk about those bottom three kind of skills that we, as a group, we're trying to come together and brainstorm about the best way to do it.
Gosh, okay, so you're putting me on the spot. I'm going to have to remember them. I think the bottom three, which we, unfortunately, as a society, have coalesced around calling soft skills, like they're somehow mushier than, being able to use a table saw or something like that.
Right.
Which is a hard skill.
Right.
I think when we talk about soft skills, they're the harder skills to learn. You should have hard skills and harder skills. And the harder skills are things like communication, teamwork, and collaboration. And then this idea of thinking systemically about the social impact of the things that you're working on and making. And part of that, is the element of a liberal arts, the elements that come in from a liberal arts education, which is thinking critically. Our students at DePaul and students in a liberal arts education aren't just learning how to get into practice. They're taking classes where they're reading, Voltaire, they're reading Montaigne, they're reading, they're reading philosophy, they're reading about religion, and they're learning about people and how people work and think. And when you take that and you apply that to a class about IoT, what you're really doing, we're not reading Montaigne, we're not reading anything like that, Heidegger in our classes, but what we are doing is we're telling students to think critically about, for instance, putting the internet in something. Do we really need the internet in toothbrushes? Do we really need, what is the impact of putting the internet in all of these, the Juicero machines that $200 million or whatever just evaporated and wasted.
Right.
And so that's the kind of, if you bring that element of critical thinking and being critical of the things you make into the classroom, then it's not just about getting from point A to point B and solving a problem, because it's never about solving the problem. It's about defining what the problem is, refining it, and kind of getting closer to addressing a situation that you understand has a systemic impact on the world around you. And then on top of that, you need to teach students how to communicate these things and to work together, right? Tell me a little bit about it, because you see students all the time. What does that look like?
Well, it's interesting when we'll go through and again, part of the things we do at Bosch for outreach. Yeah, we do recruiting. We try to find talent, things like that. But a lot of times we'll do mock interviews, we'll do resume reviews, things like that, just as a service. And again, we're no experts in this. This is just the world according to Bosch, what we're looking for. But we had talked about it in one of our sessions recently, Jay, with the team. I've run into students and they either don't have enough confidence in the things they're doing that they don't feel that they should talk about it or brag about it, number one, or number two, the communication skills aren't quite where we think they should be to be able to enter into a corporate world. And don't get me wrong, not that I'm Mr. Communicator, but some of the basics, right? And the fact that, can you send an email that communicates what you're looking for? Can you keep things professional? Do you know how to be a good team member? Do you know how to lead a team? And these aren't really abstract things. You may have led your water polo team in high school. You may have right. You may have been second chair in the band or whatever the thing is, right? I know I'm aging myself. These things don't work anymore. But it's interesting because when we do a screen and then we do a round of interviews to try to pull that out, it's hard. And we're not always great at finding that. We try to find it, and I don't think Bosch is alone. It's whether you're trying to enter into DePaul as a freshman or trying to get acceptance into DePaul versus trying to get a job. It's all the similar skills that I think most are looking for to become successful, to be successful in life. And
yeah. Our students they're learning rhetoric, right? That's something that a liberal arts, and I'm like the champion for liberal arts right now, I suppose, which I don't know if it's a popular thing these days or not. Sometimes it seems like it's not, but liberal arts, you learn rhetoric. And another really great thing, now I'm taking off my liberal arts hat and putting on my DePaul one, maybe,
Yep.
is that it's not just about rhetoric, but we're a first generation college, right? So most of the students who come through DePaul, first generation college students. I'm a first generation college student too. And, you know, you get a first generation college student typically from the Chicago area, you know, and I'm kind of like internalizing this a little bit now. And you have, and you put them through a liberal arts education. You've got a student who's you know, who understands social impact, who understands how to communicate, but they're also hungry. They've got like a blue collar work ethic behind them that, you know, I think that's something we've talked about is you need a student who's dogged. You need somebody who's not going to let go of a problem and who's willing to just throw themselves at it day in and day out until they address whatever it is.
Absolutely. I love that that factoid of the first generation, a lot of first generation students coming through. And then hopefully that, you know, continues down and they're if they have kids, and it just cycles through, which is fantastic. So, well, I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I don't know if we've lost audience members, but we're at about the 40-minute mark. And for you guys out there that had a half hour allocated, sorry that we went over, but I want to thank Jay so much for joining me today. It was nice enough to have a summer day. We were able to shoot the breeze a little bit. Hopefully we get asked back again, Jay, because we probably have another 5 or 10 or 15 topics we could discuss. So, but really appreciate your time today. Again, as you know, I say it all the time, love working with you, really enjoy the interactions we have, the collaborations we do. You make it fun, you make it interesting, you make it enjoyable. So I thank you for that. And thanks for being with us today.
Bob, thank you for having me. I'm excited to have our students working in the Connectory this summer. You're going to be seeing more of me, for better or worse, and and to be collaborating some more. So thanks for having me and letting me talk too much, probably, about things that are probably seeming overly academic and boring to everybody, but I'm passionate about them, and it's been a fun time working.
Yeah, we love your passion. We love your passion. Don't let go of that. So, all right, very good. Well, thanks everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed the short coffee talk with Jay, and we wish you a very good rest of the day. All right, bye-bye.